Okay. Then I record my audio separate on a separate platform as well, just in case. Zoom, and I'll fix my hair a little bit. There you go. Fix your hair.
Is it okay?
Yes, it is.
I
It
should
is. It is.
lower.
I'm still shiny though, but whatever. Like I said, it's better than looking dry and dull, right?
It's glowy.
Yeah, it's glow. Like who doesn't want to glow?
Well, this is it.
Yeah. Okay. If you're ready in three, two, one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today, my special guest is Pascale Mapleston. Mapleston, did I pronounce it right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Pascale is the founder and CEO of The Benefit Code. She is uniquely focused on promoting employee health by utilizing data so that people can identify potential health pain points and improve upon small health issues before they become large ones. The Benefit Code is a Canadian brokerage that is on a mission to transform the way people use healthcare. They create custom plans that look at employee data with a focus on proactive solutions. And today we're going to discuss mostly women in the workplace, hormonal challenges that might arise, and how to incorporate positive change to support women at midlife and beyond who want a career, who want to do well. And there's a lot of us out there. I mean, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So, this is an important topic. And with that, welcome, Pascal. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I think it's such an important platform to talk about, how we can improve the stats out there for Canadian women to keep working beyond and enjoy their time at work and time at home. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this because I think it's an important conversation. So it not only, I think it intertwines women who want a career, women who want to keep working, women who want to stay healthy around menopause so that they can keep working, women who don't want to, I guess, deal with ageism because just because we are getting older does not mean that our wisdom should go to waste because damn it, we have a lot of it at this stage. So,
I think that's such an important point. 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce, because of the lack of supports around, perimenopause and menopause. And when we think about that age, that's when we're in our prime in terms of contributing to, you know, work and the planet and our careers. It's what we've worked towards our entire, career life. And then when we're in our prime, just because we don't have the right supports in place or the right communication or the right dialogue, we're leaving because we don't know how to handle it or continue to grow within that constraint of what work should look like.
I agree. I think the supports are not there because you're right. Now is the best time to really share that wisdom because we've got so much of it. But I need to hear why such a keen interest in this, Pascal?
Well, I think it's health in general and making sure. Well, it started with just ensuring that our clients and their employees had access to resources when they need them. So, in Canada in particular, we're a little bit reactive in terms of the way that we approach healthcare. And it's at times very difficult to get a resources, whether it's a mental health resource or whether it's, a resource to introduce into, a workplace. It's hard to have access to that. It's hard to know who the expert is. It's hard to, know where to guide folks, when they need that resource. So my journey started with just linking people to resources that we all have access to, but this one is credible. This one is going to help you. This one will, get you over that hump. And it led me to, genetics, DNA tests, individualized health, optimizing health, And then, of course, through that, women's health, and that's become sort of the hot ticket item right now, where finally we're having that conversation in the Canadian market. And so here we are, and I'm so happy that we're finally opening that door, because it's 25% of our workforce are 40 to 55-year-old women, 25%.
In
That's
Canada.
huge.
That's in Canada.
And that's in Canada.
So, what are we seeing in terms of trends in women's health? So, you mentioned, here's the interesting thing. You mentioned mental health. So, as a 54-year-old woman, I can attest to this that when we're going through menopause, I mean, my journey started around 52, but really kind of amplified this year when my hormones were really rock bottom. Even though I was on like a baby dose
Yeah,
of bioidentical hormones, it wasn't enough to support the stage I was at. And often, what can happen to a woman is she'll be like, I can't shake this depression. I can't. And that's how I felt for a full month, Pascal. And that was the first time in my life that I was like, felt like that without a reason, of course, because we all have ups and downs. But it's like, if you're not supported as a woman, your process might be you go to your general physician, they diagnose you as clinically depressed, they put
yeah.
you on antidepressants. And what's not taken into account is the stage that you're at in your life, which might be menopause.
I know. It's really interesting that it's not the first question. Oh, how old are you? Well, unless science determines that this is probably one of, I mean, there are over 30 symptoms, right, of menopause and perimenopause, but depression, anxiety, those are some of the big ones. So that should be the first ticket. I was at a round table around women talking about workplace and menopause, and what they had experienced for themselves. And a large number of them talked about being prescribed antidepressants when they went to their doctor around some of these base symptoms. No hormone tests were run. You know, that was the beginning and the end of the conversation. So I'm hearing you, Sandy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, of course, because thyroid is my jam, thyroid can also
Mhm.
come into play. But what's so fascinating is that the thyroid can also be affected around menopause when the estrogen drops.
Yeah,
So
sluggish.
yeah, it's all interconnected. Like the endocrine system does not work in silos, right? So,
Well, so this is what we're finding. We're finding that, we've got women in the prime of their careers, the prime of their lives, not getting the supports they need, and being unable to, continue their careers, continue, managing, directing, being, not very functional at home either, and being dismissed, during those periods of time. So one of the things that we're looking at is ensuring that there are policies in place, to help support women when they're going through some of these transitions. I mean, everybody goes through it, but we've been told to kind of grin and bear it for however many hundreds of years, and I don't think that needs to be the case.
so what exactly are the stats of women's health in the workforce?
So
Around over 40, I guess over 40, over 45. What are we seeing?
yeah, so 25% of our workforce, like our female workforce, is, between those age groups. And when you think about 1 in 10 of those women leaving because they don't have supports in, and more so than that, I think the number is 3.5 billion, is the number that affects the Canadian economy because of menopause. So that's either 1 in 10 women leaving the workforce due to lack of supports, women changing their jobs, so earning less because, the stress of what their job was is just too much, or they have no flexible hours, so they go from working 5 days a week to 3 days a week just to, compensate for some of these symptoms, or what they're going through at the time. So those are huge numbers that are having a significant effect, not just on our economy, but on families and individuals and workplaces. I I don't mean to jump around, but when you think about, the big push to have women in leadership roles, and we're talking about, there's only X percentage of women CEOs. I think it's 5% women CEOs in Canada. I think it's 20% board seats. And when you think about the demographics of the men who are in those seats, they're between, 40 and 55. Those are the years that we're taking a step back because we're not getting the supports we need when it's time for us to step into these roles. And for the women who are stepping into those roles, we're not seeing the support that they need to really excel in those roles. So I think this is an amazing conversation to have, and there's so many different facets to it, but a lot of, research is saying, is this the missing link
Mm. No.
to not attaining, those CEO roles, those, corporate board seats, because we're not supported in the age that men are attaining those goals. We're leaving the workforce during those years.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think men go through it too. You hear a lot about, and this could be, we could even bring in the topic of ageism,
Yeah.
because I don't know if you have these stats, Pascal, but you know, do we even know how many women are laid off between the ages of 40 and 55, and then how many men are?
I don't have those stats, but I would love to see them. I think
Yeah.
that's, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to look into that
Yes.
because I would love to know.
Because I just know, just through personal experience, we hear of so many people, maybe even a little older, like between 45 and I don't know, 52. We hear of women and men that we know who are very career driven, have been their whole lives, get laid off.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's an important piece that we can connect to this whole part about not being supported at this stage in our life as it relates to our wellness, so that we can just simply age better and be even better using that wisdom that we've gathered all these years to our benefit, to benefit the company and to benefit everyone else.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where it's time for us to start giving back, right? Yeah.
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 So you were recently at the Longevity Summit in Portugal.
I was. So it's a beautiful place to go to a summit. So that was
Yeah, no
really nice.
kidding.
But I loved it. I loved, walking around, seeing, what's happening globally from a well-being perspective, how, different organizations are supporting individuals and companies. And what I really noticed is how proactive a lot of the other, I mean, not everywhere, but there's, some key areas that are very proactive with health, which I I really I was really inspired by. So, they're talking about, DNA tests and blood tests, and then they're talking about experiences. So a full wellness experience, a full well-being experience, and it's from the top down. So their annual checkups are so proactive. They're talking about every part of the individual, and, like just firing on all cylinders. It's just a totally different approach, really, to our healthcare system here. And I'm very grateful for a healthcare system. I'm grateful that I can walk into a hospital and get what I need when I need it, and, for my children as well. But I also know that there's a real opportunity here to kind of turn it, around to be a little bit more proactive so that we can have optimal health, because we have to ask for it. We have to advocate for it. We have to do our own research. We have to go prepared with, information and what we want out of an appointment. So I do really notice the difference at those summits, organizations coming from, Denmark, Germany, the UK, and the way that they're proactively managing health there. It's quite different than how we are here.
So First of all, I will agree with you on, there's definitely some benefits. My son had to have pretty major reconstructive surgery on his shoulder. He's a baseball player. And I have I have a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon in the US, and he's like, that probably would have cost over $200,000 here on top of even if you had insurance. I'm like, oh my God. So we have to be grateful for that.
Yes.
And however, what were the main differences that you did see? You mentioned genetics. So I'm a big fan. I've done at least 10 genetic tests. I know mine and my family's genetics pretty much inside out on what we can know anyway, because I think there's still a lot more to be discovered. However, what other things did you notice that other countries are doing for longevity and proactive health?
Okay, so women's health was a huge topic. There was almost an entire day devoted to women's health, and there was this amazing speaker, a female physician from the UK, who talked a lot about breaking over barriers. They're ahead of us in a lot of ways in terms of creating policy in the workplace and in Parliament over women's health, but they're still talking about barriers there. So that really got my attention. I would say the biggest piece of the conference that I brought back with me was the day on women's health, which also combined a day on sexual health as well. But I mean, that's a different podcast.
Mm, mhm. So what are they saying? Do they like in terms of the policy, like what are they actually putting into place that we don't have in Canada?
So what I like is that we're starting to have the conversation, and there are some organizations that are starting to look at, putting in place some base policies, and we'll touch on that, I think, in a second. But I don't know if it was 5 or 6 years ago in the UK, they had a HRT shortage, which was affecting women, across the country, and they were like, it was to the point where it was affecting their economy that they had a parliamentary review on the fact that hormone replacement therapy wasn't available in an affordable way. So that's one of the things that they talked about. Like, let's make sure that women have access to HRT and it's affordable, and that they can, go back to work and go back to their families and function, as part of, you know, the economy and part of, who they are. So that was huge. And just talking about how, individuals, you know, can be severely impacted by, menopause and perimenopause, and no one's even talked about it. Who even knew that perimenopause existed up until, a couple years ago? I mean, some people talked about it, but it's 10 years ahead of menopause, and you start getting symptoms like exhaustion and hair loss, and you can't sleep anymore, and, all of these pieces. And people are like, oh, it's just a busy time in your life. You're going to be okay. But meanwhile, you're going to function in the workplace just like everybody else with no understanding of the fact that you haven't slept. So in the UK, they were a little bit ahead of us in terms of talking to workplaces and making sure that just opening the dialogue. It's saying this is happening. It's normal. It's affecting 25% of our people. So let's make sure that we have empathy, understanding, and we start supporting is water available, when people are working? If they're wearing uniforms, are they, light and breathable? Can you layer them? So if you have, a change in, temperature, you can still function in your uniform, like pretty base pieces
Yeah.
that seem very obvious, but they weren't. And, these are some of the conversations they're having. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit about, benefits and how to better support, women here in terms of the workplace benefit offerings. But they started having that conversation. Is mental health support services available? Do you have access to a physician? Do you have virtual health? Can you, reach out when you need it? And are you being, taken seriously? Like, this isn't something that we have to grin and bear anymore. This is something that, can be very different with the right supports and the right, care and the right treatment. So let's make sure everybody knows what they are.
Yeah, okay. I think there just needs to be a shift. So, just in the whole thought process behind it, like this is a stage in life. And if you think about it, okay, think about if you have children, what are they taught in school? They're taught about, the whole process of puberty and, women getting their periods and then having a child and how much time is really spent on menopause. So this is the thing, right? I have kids. I have one daughter, and even my son, I will openly say, "Yeah, I'm having a hot flash," or "Yeah, I'm going through menopause." And I was starting to go through it while my daughter was in that crux of puberty. And
Yeah,
I'm like, essentially, we're kind of going through similar things right now.
yeah,
And it's a lot of it is about education, which is where I come in. I was on a stage last year, I think it was last year, moderating a panel. We were talking about beauty and skin and that sort of thing and biohacking beauty. And I had the worst hot flash right on the stage. So I called it out. I said, "People, I'm in the middle. You're going to notice my face is red. I'm having
yeah,
a hot flash. Please, can we just like notice it and then move along so that everyone's not going, Jesus, what's wrong with Sandy's face?"
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the more we talk about it, that this is a necessary phase. And to me, it's not a transition where you age out. It's a
That's right.
transition where wisdom can become so prevalent if we can support the women going through it.
Well, I mean, absolutely. It it seems so basic to me that we wouldn't support, you know, anybody going through a transition, but to know like the numbers that it affects and w- it affects their families and it affects, their daughters and their kids and how they perceive, women when they get to a certain age. I think there was an article about Julianne Moore and her co-star hitting the red carpet in Vienna, for that movie festival, saying women of a certain age can still hit the red carpet. And I was like, what a like I thought like, is that news? And why should that be news? Like, is that
Yeah.
the way we talk about George Clooney and Brad Pitt? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
older than them. I
Yeah.
mean, they're so anyways,
Or, oh, she looks beautiful for her age.
yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, she looks beautiful. How about
Yeah.
that? Let's just
She
leave it at that.
she's beautiful, but I love the fact that you called that out, and I think that that's one of the key pieces to, having an inclusive, workplace in it's just having that open dialogue, and some women will not be comfortable with that, but the fact that others are having it and they're comfortable with it means that everybody's aware of it, and, like not taking it lightly, like not making jokes about it, not, like just treating it with respect because it really does affect, a lot of us. And it's not just, women, like non-binary go through it too. And, transgenders also go through, you know, many of them also go through, menopause. So I think it's important that we're talking about, all genders, like you mentioned before, Sandy, like it's affecting all of us.
Yeah. And, it's not if, it's when.
That's correct. Yeah,
So it is a very important milestone and stage in our lives.
yeah,
And here's the thing that we know now because of these conversations. We know that if we support our health around midlife, we will age better and we will have a better health span. How many people out there know of somebody who got sick, had cancer, all these things? So many things can come up around midlife.
absolutely.
And I'm not saying, this is not a conversation to say you have to go on bioidentical hormones. There are many ways to go through menopause, and it's your choice on how you want to do it. But given these choices and options and educating on this is really, really important to say, here's a bunch of options.
That's right.
And in order to do that, we must marry all wellness principles, Eastern, Western. We gotta have these options to say, I resonate with this. I don't resonate with bioidentical hormones, but I like this option.
Yeah.
And it might be Chinese medicine, or it might be, but there are many different ways that we can support this stage.
Yeah. I think there are many different ways that we can support this stage, and that, knowledge is power. And I think that the more we know as individuals, the more that we can make informed decisions. If you go, to your maybe your doctor and say, I'm having symptoms, and they put you on, some bioidentical hormones, they might not be the right hormones for you if you haven't done the testing ahead of time to know exactly where your numbers are at, because your numbers are going to be different than my numbers. That's going to be different than, Sally's numbers. And you can't just play hit and miss with hormones either. So there's another deeper level of, yes, get the research, but where are you holding? What makes sense for you based on where your numbers are? And, asking for those tests is a really important part of the process.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned 1 in 10 women are leaving the workforce in this age category.
Yeah.
What are the main issues that they are actually encountering that's causing them to leave?
So I'm not, so there are a few things. Non-accommodation, you know, not being able to handle, what they're going through and what the, requirements are within the job. And I think that other, side of the coin, 1 in 10 are leaving, but there are 540K in terms of lost days at work. People are calling in sick. They're not showing up. 3.3 billion in lost income annually due to a reduction in hours or days that you work. Like, it's not just 1 in 10 leaving, it's also the ones who are staying, working at, in a different capacity, or they're working, less, or they're calling in sick because we're not making accommodations. So the number one piece here is accommodation, and making sure that your policies will support women in that time, because as an employer, you're going to benefit financially, and you're going to keep your people long term if you're just able to make some, small accommodations.
So you're talking about flexibility. There's a couple of things. There's
Yeah,
flexibility, but
yeah,
then there's also the health supporting side of it as well.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can look at doing. I mean, the basics, right? Making sure that you have, cold water available for, somebody if they're thirsty, or that you have air conditioning and it's well ventilated, so that when you have hot sweats or, differences in temperatures, you're not working in a, in a sauna. But the biggest piece would be those flex days or flex hours or time off if you need it without repercussion. So understanding that, this month, like you talked about last year, where you had that month of complete, like, what would have happened if you were working somewhere, you had to go to work every day and you weren't being supported? You'd feel like potentially you had to leave, or you had to reduce your hours. So let's support you during that time, meaning like you've got flex days, maybe you're working from home more, change the hours according to your schedule. And then having, the benefits support you in terms of mental health, making sure that you have enough dollars in the mental health segment of your employee benefits that you can go out and get, naturopath, you can get, a dietitian, you can go and see, a psychologist, and get those supports around what you need to do to get back to work, or, get the information that you need. Being able to, follow your own journey in terms of, um, those flex dollars on how you're going to get through like I go and see a naturopathic doctor that isn't covered through regular benefit plan, but my flex dollars pay for that. So I'm still able to support, my journey. And that's through a completely flexible spend. That's where I'm choosing. And if I was 30, maybe I would freeze my eggs with that flexible spend. We need to be able to support women of any age in the workforce and what's going to, work for them.
What's the most common that like what do I'd love to know what benefits in Canada most commonly support because most of the time, correct me if I'm wrong because it's not my expertise, but they'll give you whatever, 500 bucks per practitioner, you know, chiropodist, massage therapy,
Yeah.
like and then there's health spending accounts. Like what else on top? Is that standard what I mentioned?
So a lot of workplaces still don't have healthcare spending accounts or flexible spends. So a lot of them are still in a very, cookie cutter plan with a limited paramedical amount. Their mental health resources being the same as what they get for massage, which, we want employees to choose where they're going to make their spend. So where we want employee plans to go and where, a lot of our clients are moving towards aren't necessarily where most benefit plans are still holding in the country. So what you're talking about is, yes, it's pretty cookie cutter, but that flex spend still is not in every benefit plan and should be to support, issues like, female health, male health,
Yeah.
mental health, whatever you're going through.
So here's something interesting too, is that so I am a registered holistic nutritionist, but I am not a licensed physician. I am not a licensed dietitian,
Yes.
right? And here's what actually kind of makes me a little bit crazy is that I'm not going to name the company, but they are an health insurance company. They did not know the difference between what a registered dietitian is and what a holistic nutritionist is. And so I'm like, wait a second. They're very different ways at looking at nutrition and diet and lifestyle and how it affects the body. I mean, I know there are some RDs that are more naturally trained,
Yes.
like in the US, especially the ones who go to Bastyr University and
Yeah.
much more naturally trained. But then there's some RDs that put corn syrup solids in baby formulas.
Right.
So, you know, a holistic nutritionist doesn't do that stuff. So it's very different. And yet, some of these companies don't understand the difference. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Holistic nutritionist is not even in the same category. I just know this because when I was seeing clients one on one, this is the stuff they would run into.
Right.
It's a problem because they're very different.
They're very different. And, I think that's another example of why that flex spend is so important because, you're having access to folks like you, Sandy. Like if I want to come to you and talk about, holistic nutrition, that should be okay. You're trained in your field, you have information to offer, you're going to help me optimize my health, and we should have access to that. So having that flex spend and allowing people to choose is really key to that optimization.
I agree. And but this is it. This is the key to your point, having the option to choose.
Yes.
So if somebody wants to go on, a diet that is a standard American diet, but it's like caloric restriction or something,
Yeah.
okay, if you really want to do that, that's your choice. But just
Right.
because I am not licensed does
Right.
not mean I'm not qualified. And
No,
I
I
will
agree.
say that I'm actually going to say that twice. Just because I am not licensed, meaning I'm not an MD or an RD, does not mean I'm not qualified to talk about a subject that I'm trained in.
Agree.
right?
Yeah, totally.
So it kind of it opens up a whole other can of worms, but the fact is menopause, there are some women, I know a lot of women who choose to go through it naturally and want to support their bodies naturally, and that's fine. It's everybody's choice, and there are ways you could do this pretty amazing in holistic ways
Yeah.
without the BHRT.
I agree. And, I think that going back to something I said earlier about knowing your numbers and how to support each of those, categories will help you do it naturally as well. Because
Yes.
that's, it's knowledge is power. So however, y- you attain your like health goals is really up to you. I know kind of what scared me a little bit, and maybe scare is the wrong word, but there's research coming out about, those who do not seek, treatment during this period have a higher link of mental health conditions, when they get older. And, yeah, I'm not going to quote any of the studies, but I read a couple of articles about that. And I'm hoping that more research is going to be done because I guess it stretches us a lot, going through things without those supports
Yeah.
in place. So whether it's supporting yourself through nutrition or food or, through, hormone replacement, I just think it's really important to get to really understand and um, figure out what's going to work for you.
Yeah, we have to do things differently. And I think it's very important that we identify that. Just like what you said, we have to have proper testing and then we can choose the course of action, but we got to do things differently at this stage.
Absolutely. I just wanna mention, like, when I was, back from the UK and looking for resources to incorporate into my own business, making sure that we're, talking to our clients about policies for menopause and perimenopause and, resources for, employees when they're going to see the doctors. I was literally recreating the wheel because there's this amazing foundation in Canada that has all of these support pieces just built into their website. And they had these, charts on, chart your symptoms before you go see your doctor to, order your test. They have like this checklist for at work on, some of the policies to consider implementing. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing for two reasons. One, that we have these resources at our fingertips and it's, a free resource, and two, that I didn't know about it.
So, what
You
are the
know,
policies, Pascal? What are some of the policies?
okay, so the way that we approach it is, look at making sure that you've got a flexible work schedule available, flexible time off. Look at your benefit plan to make sure you're supporting folks in. And I actually, let me just pull up my notes in terms of our other policies that we really encourage. Um, uh, Putting together a task force that would have, sessions depending on how many times a year you'd like to do it, let's say even quarterly, just talking about menopause in the workplace and making sure that it's part of the open dialogue, putting together roundtable discussions with, the executives, making sure we're supporting employees and making sure that male employees are aware of it too. Like we don't just want women talking about it. We want to make sure that the folks in the boardroom are aware of the policies that we want to do. So adjusting work environments, very important. Making sure that benefits reflect the needs, making sure time, whether it's time off or flexible time schedule is there, and making sure if you're in an environment with uniforms that you're ensuring that, it makes sense in terms of where they're working and that they're light and you can layer them. It seems very silly, but the menopause awareness sessions are huge, like
I
in
was
terms
going to
of
say
putting them in. Yeah.
education is key
Yeah, education,
because
dialogue.
so I get this comes up a lot actually is why didn't our grandparents need hormones? Why didn't they really need all that? And I'm going to tell you this. This is my take on it because my grandmother lived till she was 82. She was really sharp. My dad is 87, sharp. My mom, 78, sharp. Okay. Now, the big difference between now, going through menopause now, and say my grandmother lived off the land and
Yeah.
they had a lot of natural solutions to help them go through it. And I truly believe that their menopause experience was different than ours because of the way that we live now.
I I I don't disagree with that, and I wonder also if the fact that they were having kids younger, um,
My
you
grandmother
know
had my mom at 42. I think she was 42, so no.
okay,
It
so
wasn't
no.
in her case anyway.
Yeah,
But I am I just think it's so interesting to look back.
yeah,
'Cause it's a question I get asked a lot, and some doctors will go, "Well, we didn't live as long back then." Well, she lived till 82, which is pretty
yeah,
good, but she lived
that is,
off the land.
yeah,
And we can't like, I can't live off the land where I live right now. Like, I don't have the space for a garden, but
yeah,
God, I'd love to. I think food, nutrition, and lifestyle has a huge piece in all of this. And when we educate women that, okay, let's say you don't want to go on the HRT, you're
mhm,
going to have to do something else to
right,
optimize your aging process. From this point, well, you should do it your whole life, but from this point on, especially. And
yes.
educating is amazing for anyone in the workforce.
Well, I think, diet is the key factors to our health at any age, our mental health, our physical, like you're right. We should be starting that from, v- educating in the workplace and at school. And I'm not talking about the four food groups because a lot of the, issues that we deal with our clients are, type 2 diabetes, they're, hypertension, they're all related back to lifestyle and food, right? So I think that this is, a key point, Sandy, that in women's health, as if they don't know what what to have, like to optimize their health, I I'd love actually to talk to you about that in terms of like educational for some of our clients on optimizing hormonal health through food. I think that would be such a key topic, and I'd love to explore that further with you, Sandy.
Yeah, I think so. Here's something interesting. I think you mentioned you had kids, right?
Yeah,
You have kids.
yeah,
So I have a daughter in university, and you know what university's like. Okay. I partied my face off in university. I had the best time of my life in university. That was a long time ago, though. And times have changed. Food has changed. And I actually say this to my kids all the time. I'm like, listen, McDonald's now is not the same as McDonald's in the 80s and even early 90s. It's just not the same. So fast food has changed. So I think that's their way of rebelling for me. Like,
yeah.
you know,
Same, by the
which is
way, sneaking a Coke. I'm like, what are you doing?
yeah, yeah. But I explained to her before she left, don't forget that what you eat is going to dictate what kind of a month you have, what kind of a cycle you're going to have, what kind of a mindset you're going to have.
Yes,
And I think at this stage, to be honest, I think we can't do it alone with food alone because of our food sources. But when we support ourselves with targeted nutraceuticals, that's another great way. Natural health products, I'm telling you, Pascal, they can be very powerful just to support and be preventative and proactive with our health.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's one of those, I mean, that's the main reason that we started bringing DNA kits in, 10 years before anybody else was talking about them here, because we didn't know from an individual perspective what we needed to supplement, in terms of like, what do I need to make sure that I am going to live my best life based on my predispositions. So
Yeah.
just because you have predispositions doesn't mean that they're going to actually, exercise themselves. So, make sure that you have the supplements that you need individually to support your health. And I'm going to say it again, knowledge is power. Individualized knowledge is power.
And, it amazes me that so we know B12 is really important for
Yeah.
brain health, for sleep, for, like, everything. And yet and there's so many different things that are being talked about that are trends, such as, vegan diets. Well, then you're gonna be lacking in B12. And then you may go to the drugstore and take cyanocobalamin, which is actually a very cheap way of making B12.
Okay.
So you want a methylated form, but it comes from cyanide. People don't know this.
That's
Like,
right.
people don't know this. So there are Walmart brands and not knocking Walmart. Everybody loves Walmart, but you have to be careful about what and DNA tests can actually help with that. Just understanding and even you get your raw data from these kits, and then you can use them on other platforms to really investigate, and then you piece into it your own lifestyle. You can really create a beautiful little map of what works. Like, I know I have issues with detoxification,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I took my gel nails off because I did a there you go. That's another thing. Women, thermography scans. I did a whole body thermography and I had bright red inflammation on my nail beds. And I was like, what's going on here? Took them off because I was like, something's wrong. I'm having pain in my wrist. You see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
all of this is connected. And while it may not pose a problem for you, it does for me because I know I have issues with my detoxification.
Right.
So there's just anyway, we could go all over the place on this topic, but the key is, I think a big takeaway is that knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, and really making sure that you are prepared for the conversation that you're going to have with, your doctor, your employer, your boss. I mean, this should come from organizations themselves, but if you're not feeling supported, there are, simple shifts that can happen in the workplace so that, you know, everyone can feel supported when they need it.
So where do we start? Where does somebody who's listening to this, because my podcast, I do have a lot of American listeners
Okay.
um as well. How does someone start?
So where I wish I had started is with like finding that information from the foundation of menopause. Like I really did find some great resources. And I'll send you the link if you want. They had a couple of checklists and they had a really great policy checklist for employers, like where they
Oh,
can start.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah, send me that.
yeah, so they had a where to start as an individual, so you can start tracking your symptoms. And then they had a really beautifully politically correct Q&A on how to approach your doctor. Okay, so
I'm
um,
not always politically correct,
no,
Pascal. I'm sorry, but
but for a
I
lot
do
of
my best.
yeah, well, you don't have you're advocating for everyone, but for the other ones who want the tests and they want to walk out with what they need, it really goes through like step by step. And if this happens, talk about X and this is what you need to walk out with and this is, the support that you need from your doctor. And if you don't get the support you need from that doctor, here's a list of doctors that you can go see. Some you have to
Oh.
pay for, some you don't. And if you go see a gynecologist, don't forget to get a referral. So it was a beautiful checklist. And I really thought, wow, if I had seen this a few years ago, because uh, we recreated a lot of that, but this one was next level. And then they also have one for employers in terms of here are the policies you need to look at. Here are, some of the accommodations that you need to make in your benefits plan. I mean, these are things we've been talking about for a long time with our clients, but If you have, a broker that's not proactive, they're not going to see this until so send it to them. Say, this is what we want our employee benefits to look like so that we can support, 25% of our workforce, because those are the numbers. I'll send you that link. And if you
Yeah.
want to, share it, I really thought that was a great place to start.
Now, can you explain how the benefit code works? Are you like a middleman between insurance companies and businesses? Like, how do you work?
Okay. So we're an employee benefits brokerage in Canada. We're licensed across Canada, and we provide benefit plans and pensions and retirement packages for employers and their people. Um, and I took a hard right when I realized that the data within the plans was able to help us optimize the health of the employees, and so the health of the organization and the costs. So we really focus on employee health, and making sure that we help employers help employees optimize their health. I know there's a couple of links, and I fell into women's health just because it became a topic of conversation around the dinner table between my friends and I, and then between workplaces and, policies not being there, and then going, across the world to see conferences on women's health years before we did it. And I just thought we need to start having this conversation here. We need to really advocate for our workforce, for our economy, for women who want to be around that boardroom table if they choose to be, or, if they just want to work, at full capacity in their own job, we need to support them. So this is, sort of been my dialogue, outside of what we do best, which is we do benefits, but we also advocate for health in general and women's health in particular.
And what I like most is how you talk about prevention and proactive health. And I think that's so critically important.
Sandy, like when I first started my career way back when, I was on the other side, I was on the supplier side, and I was having conversations with, brokers and their clients about, hey, look at the data, like 20% of your folks are on like antidepressants or, diabetic medication. I feel like we could do something with that. And it just didn't resonate out there. And when I went to the other side and opened up my brokerage, that was an opportunity for me to really dive into that passion, because there is an opportunity in the data. And when you see it on paper, you can put the programs in place to shift the health of your folks. And it's bottom line for the employer, but the employee becomes a better person at home, at work, with their kids, with their spouses. So it's
Yeah. I think the one thing that we kind of missed in all of this is that when you support this really, really important transition, you are supporting the person's longevity by supporting the fact that they may feel more stress during this time. We didn't really use the word stress, but I think stress is kind of like it's almost like the crux of this transition. Like it causes you more stress, period, end of story, which can make it more difficult to do anything else.
absolutely. I mean, like the fact, like you'd be stressed about the fact that you're anxious, about the fact that your hair's falling out, about the fact that you can't sleep at night. And if you're not sleeping, you're more stressed. So it's so many different layers. And, from an employer perspective, putting in these policies is the right decision for their people. But if they're not going to do it for that reason, do it because, the numbers are there. The
Mhm.
fact that, 25% of their workforce is missing days at work, they're, not functioning right, they need accommodation, and it affects their bottom line and their productivity. Like that might be a good enough reason for some. Hopefully, most of us are going to do it because it's the right thing to do.
And then I'm just gonna add to this,
Yeah.
employers, you'd be making a massive, massive mistake to let us amazing women go just because of menopause. I gotta add that in there because I'm like, you have no idea. Um, so if I was gonna go and look at, so I used to work in the corporate world. I was in sales and marketing. I managed a sales team, and um, God, I'm so much more wiser now than I was back then.
Aren't we? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let us know where we can find you, what
Okay.
your website, and yeah, let us know.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, so thebenefitcode.ca, Pascal at thebenefitcode.ca if you have questions for me or if you want to connect. I'm always up for a great conversation about health, employee health, um, pretty much anything. So, I mean, not
Awesome.
anything, but
Well, anything related to wellness.
yeah.
Any last things that I may have not touched on that you need to mention?
I think that you touched on a lot, and I'm very grateful for, the ability to have this conversation on a platform where people are so interested in health and health optimization. Knowledge is power. Make sure that you've got the resources that you need, and that we're still at the place in Canada where you have to advocate for yourself. So be prepared before you go into those conversations. So that link I'll send you, which I really liked a lot, is a good place to start.
Amazing. And then the other thing I will say, of course, is to share this with your employer or with your physician. Just say, I listened to this podcast. It's a great way to just spread the word that these conversations are very real and they're happening, and we don't want to be behind the times in this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming, Pascal. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Sandy.